Josie Carter pressed her mother's worn leather shoe against her face and screamed. Not a little girl's scream. Something older, something that tore itself raw from the center of her chest and kept going long after it should have died. The shoe was still warm from the morning sun. The mud around it was fresh-turned and dark. And Emmeline Carter was nowhere. 4 children stood at that creek bank, Josie at 12 holding baby Lily against her ribs with one arm while her fingers locked around that single shoe. Sam at 9, ash-pale and shaking. Violet and Rose behind him, too young to name the thing they were feeling, and old enough to know it was the worst thing that had ever happened to them. If this story already has your heart in your throat, you are exactly where you belong. Please take a moment right now and subscribe to this channel, hit that notification bell so you never miss a story like this one, and drop a comment below telling me what city or state you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now stay with me, because what happens next in that canyon will change every single one of these lives forever. The shoe was a size 7. Brown leather, the sole worn thin at the heel the way it always got from Emmeline's habit of dragging her right foot just slightly when she walked tired. Josie knew that shoe the way she knew her own hands. She had watched her mother lace it up 1,000 mornings in 1,000 different circumstances in the cold dark of a Kansas farmhouse at 4 in the morning, in the back of a wagon, with her knees pulled to her chest, and in the weeds outside Tucson when the wagon wheel broke and they had to sleep in the open for 3 nights. She knew that shoe. She knew her mother would not have taken it off. Not here. Not at a creek crossing in the middle of open Colorado hill country with 4 of her children depending on her to keep moving. Emmeline Carter did not stop moving. That was the one law of their lives that had never broken. Until now. Josie! Sam's voice came out pressed flat, like he was trying to keep it from shaking apart. Josie, where is she? I don't know. You said you'd only be gone 10 minutes to fill the canteens. I know what I said, Sam. You left us back there with the girls, and you said 10 minutes, and now Mama's. I know. Josie turned on him so fast that Rose flinched and pressed herself against Sam's side. I know. I was gone 10 minutes. I came back and she isn't here, Sam. The shoes are here and she isn't. And I need you to stop talking and help me think. Sam pressed his mouth into a line. He was 9 years old, and he had the face of a boy who had already decided he was not going to cry no matter what. That was the thing about Sam. He stored everything in that jaw, locked it down like a chest with a bad hinge, and just kept standing. Josie had always been grateful for that. She was grateful for it now, even as it terrified her. Baby Lily made a sound against Josie's collarbone, not quite a cry, more of a shudder, like she was cold even in the full blaze of the July sun. Josie shifted her, pressed her palm flat against the back of Lily's head and felt it. The heat. Too much heat coming off the baby's skull. Lily was 8 months old. She had been fussy and warm since the morning before, and Emmeline had been watching her with that particular quiet expression she wore when she was frightened, but refusing to show it. She's burning up again, Josie said mostly to herself. Mama had the fever drops in her coat pocket, Violet offered. She was 7, and she said it with a 7-year-old's confidence that this information would fix something. I know she did. Josie turned to look downstream, then up. The creek bent hard to the right about 30 yards above them and disappeared around a wall of red rock. She could not see what was past that bend. She could not see anything past that bend. The mud on the bank was churned in a way that made her stomach go cold. Boot prints that weren't her mother's, wider, heavier, the kind left by men. Sam! She kept her voice steady. She had been keeping her voice steady for 3 weeks now, and she was so tired of it she could have sat down in the creek and just let the current carry her somewhere. I need you to take Violet and Rose back to the tree line, the big cottonwood where we left the packs. You remember it? Yeah. Stay there. Keep the girls low. Don't make noise. Where are you going? Up the bank. I need to see what's past that bend. Sam grabbed her arm. His grip was harder than she expected for a 9-year-old, hard enough that she actually stopped. You are not going up there alone, he said. His voice did not shake. It was a statement of plain fact. Someone has to stay with Violet and Rose. Then you stay with them, and I'll go. Sam, you've got Lily. She opened her mouth, closed it. He was right. She was holding a sick infant against her chest with one arm and her mother's shoe in her other hand, and she was in no position to argue about who was better positioned to scout a creek bend in hill country in the middle of a Colorado July. She hated that he was right. She hated that he was 9 years old and right about something that no 9-year-old should ever have to be right about. You go to the bend, she said. You look around it. You don't step past the rock. You just look. And if you see anyone, you come straight back. You do not engage with anyone. You do not speak to anyone. You come straight back to me. Say it back. I go to the bend. I look around the rock. I see anyone. I come back. Anyone. Anyone. He met her eyes. I'll be 2 minutes. He was back in 90 seconds. There's men up there, he said. He was breathing hard, but his voice was still flat and controlled, and Josie thought not for the first time that Sam was going to be either a very great man or a very dangerous one when he grew up. 2 of them that I can see. They've got horses, and they've got... He stopped. Sam. They've got Mama. The world did a slow, tilting thing. Josie felt it physically, a drop in her chest, a ringing in her ears. The sun suddenly too bright on every surface. Baby Lily whimpered and pressed her hot face into Josie's neck. Rose started to cry with the quiet, miserable efficiency of a 5-year-old who had learned that crying loudly got her in trouble. Violet reached over and took Rose's hand without being asked. She's alive. Josie's voice came out barely above a whisper. She was standing. They had her hands tied. Sam's jaw worked. She wasn't fighting them. She looked like she was trying to be calm. Like she was trying to think. That was Emmeline Carter all over. Trying to think. Even with her hands bound and her children somewhere behind her in a canyon, she was standing there trying to think, because she knew that panic was the most expensive thing a person could spend in a bad situation, and she could not afford it. Okay, Josie said. Her voice was still shaking, but her mind had gone very clear the way it always did when things got worst. This was the gift her mother had never intended to give her, the terrible ability to function in a crisis. We need help. I can't go up there with Lily, and you can't go up there at 9 years old, and if those men see us, they'll... She stopped herself before she finished that sentence. Not in front of Violet and Rose. We need an adult. There are no adults, Sam said. It was not accusatory. It was simply the truth they had been living for 3 weeks. Then we find one. She had not planned to say it. It came out of some part of her that had been running calculations in the background while the rest of her was crumbling. They were in Colorado Hill Country, maybe 8 miles from the nearest settlement, and the settlement was small, a cluster of ranches and a feed store, and a church she had seen from the ridge 2 days prior. If someone was out working their land today, if someone was close enough to the canyon edge to hear, she tipped her head back and she screamed. Not a word, not a name. Just sound, the biggest sound she had in her everything, from the bottom of her lungs, up through her throat, and out into the open summer air. It bounced off the red rock walls and rolled across the canyon, and she felt it in her ribs when it came back to her. Baby Lily startled and began to cry in earnest now, and Rose cried harder in sympathy, and the whole creek bank was suddenly a wall of noise. Sam stared at her. What are you doing? Getting help. You're going to get those men's attention. They already know we're somewhere in this canyon. Mama being here tells them that. She hauled air into her lungs. If there's a person within a mile of this place, they'll hear us. She screamed again, and then she heard it hoofbeats. Not from the direction of the bend, from above, from the ridge. Silas Turner had not intended to come down into that canyon today. He had intended to ride his north fence line, check the 3 posts he'd been meaning to fix since March, and be back to his ranch by noon. That was the plan. He was good at plans when they involved the ranch and the horses and the land and nothing else. He was considerably less good at anything that involved other people, which was why he had spent the better part of 4 years ensuring that he had as few encounters with other people as humanly possible. He heard the scream when he was on the ridge above the creek and his horse threw her head and sidestepped. He pulled her in without thinking, listening. It came again, longer this time, rawer, the kind of sound that did not come from an animal and did not come from a person who was merely startled. It came from someone who was afraid in the particular bottomless way of a person who had run out of options. He sat there for a moment that felt longer than it was. He told himself it was nothing. He told himself it was probably a couple of travelers having a disagreement, or a woman who'd seen a snake, or any number of things that were none of his business and did not require him to descend a steep canyon wall and involve himself in someone else's disaster. Then he heard the baby. He did not choose to move. His hands found his reins, and his heels found his mare's sides, and she picked her way down the canyon slope before he had consciously decided to let her. What he found at the bottom of that creek bank was not what he had expected. He had expected, if he was honest, one person. He had not expected 4 children, the oldest no more than 12, standing in the creek mud, with a baby on her hip and a worn leather shoe clutched in her fist, her face set into an expression of fierce, exhausted authority that had absolutely no business being on a child's face. 3 others stood slightly behind her. A boy with close-cropped dark hair and the defensive posture of someone who had appointed himself bodyguard. 2 small girls, one of them openly weeping, and one of them watching Silas with enormous unblinking gray eyes that felt like they were counting his sins. Silas pulled his mare to a halt 15 feet away and said nothing. He had learned over 4 years of near-total solitude that silence was generally the right first move. People filled silence. They told you things in silence that they would never tell you if you spoke first. The oldest girl spoke first. "Are you from one of the ranches up on the ridge?" "I am," he said. "How many men are on your land?" He blinked. That was not the question he had anticipated. "It's just me." "Do you have a gun?" He did. He had the Colt revolver on his right hip that he wore out of habit more than expectation, and the Winchester in the saddle scabbard, which he carried because this was Colorado hill country, and there were mountain lions and the occasional dispute over property lines that could go sideways without warning. "I do," he said. "My mother has been taken by 2 men with horses. They're up the creek around that bend in the rock. They have her hands bound." The girl said it the way someone reads from a list deliberately, each word placed precisely, like she had already organized the information into what a person needed to know first. "I need your help getting her back." Silas looked at her for a long moment. He looked at the baby on her hip, whose face was flushed with what was clearly a fever. He looked at the boy who was watching him with open suspicion. He looked at the 2 small girls, one crying and one not. He looked at the shoe in the oldest girl's hand. "What's your name?" he said. "Josie Carter. That's Sam and Violet and Rose, and the baby is Lily." "Where are you coming from, Josie Carter, huh?" Something flickered behind her eyes, a decision about how much to tell him. "Kansas originally. We've been traveling." She paused. "We've been running, actually, from some men. I think these are the same men." "What do these men want with your family?" Her chin came up. She was 12 years old, and she had the dignity of someone considerably older. "They want my mother," she said. "And I intend to get her back. I'm asking for your help because I have 4 children in this canyon, and a baby who needs medicine, and I cannot be in 2 places at once. If you won't help me, then I need you to take the children to your ranch and keep them safe while I go get her myself." Sam made a sound of protest at that. Silas ignored it. He sat on his horse and he looked at this child who had apparently decided that those were her only 2 options. Get help or do it alone, and he felt something move in his chest that he had not felt in a very long time. Not pity. Something harder and less comfortable than pity. Recognition. He had been alone in a bad place once. He had been the one with no options and no one coming. He knew what that felt like from the inside, and he had sworn to himself after it that he would never be the person who didn't come when someone needed coming too. "I'll help you," he said. The boy, Sam, took a step forward. "We don't know you." "No," Silas agreed. "You don't. You could be one of them. You could be with the men who took Mama." "I could be." Silas swung down from the saddle. The mare shifted but stayed put. He stood at his full height, which was considerable, and he looked at the boy straight on, because Sam was the kind of boy who would respect being looked at straight on and would not respect anything less. I'm not, but I understand that you don't have a reason to take my word for that. No, we don't, Sam said. Then let me earn it. He looked at Josie. The baby needs water and shade first. How long has she been running that fever? Josie blinked. The question had surprised her. Since yesterday morning. Mama had fever drops, but they were in her coat pocket. I don't have fever drops. I've got willow bark at the ranch. He glanced at the creek. Creek water's clean this high up. Get her drinking. Then I need to know everything you know about those men, how many horses, what they were wearing, whether they're armed, and how. You're going to help us? Rose asked. She had stopped crying and was looking up at him with the sudden absolute trust of a 5-year-old who has been frightened for a long time and wants very badly to believe that an adult has arrived to fix things. It was the most dangerous look Silas Turner had ever seen, because it was the kind of look that made a man feel the weight of what he was agreeing to. Yes, ma'am, he said, and he meant it. I'm going to help you. Why? Sam asked. It was the right question. Silas considered it honestly, which was the only way he knew how to consider anything these days. He thought about the fence posts that still needed fixing. He thought about the 4 years he had spent telling himself that his business was his land and his horses, and nothing beyond the edge of his property. He thought about the leather shoe in Josie's hand, and the way she had been holding it against her chest when he rode up, like it was the last thing she had of her mother, which maybe it was. Because there isn't anyone else, he said. Sam held his gaze for a long measuring moment. Then slowly, he stepped back. Not all the way, not with any warmth, but back which was enough. Josie was already kneeling at the creek bank, cupping water to Lily's lips with one careful hand, murmuring things to the baby in a low voice that was too quiet for Silas to hear. Violet had taken Rose's hand again. The whole scene had the quality of a family that had been practicing this moving through hardship together, each person finding their role, closing ranks around the weakest member without being told. Silas led his mare to the water and let her drink, and he watched the Carter children, and he thought about the men around that bend in the rock, and he thought about what kind of men took a woman with 4 children in a canyon in July, and he thought about the fact that he had a revolver and a Winchester, and the advantage of knowing this particular stretch of hill country better than anyone else alive. Tell me everything, he said to Josie. She looked up from his baby. Her eyes were dry. She had screamed herself empty 20 minutes ago, and now she was back to the business of surviving, and she began to talk. Silas Turner listened to every word. Josie talked for 7 minutes straight without stopping. She told Silas about the farm outside of Dodge City that had belonged to her father before he died of pneumonia 2 winters back. She told him about the debt a loan her father had taken from a man named Emmett Crane, a man who ran cattle north of the Arkansas River and who had a way of making loans that were designed from the start, never to be repaid in full. She told him how Crane had started coming to the farm after the funeral first, with papers, then with men, then with a kind of pressure that didn't use fists because it didn't need to. She told him about the morning 3 weeks ago when her mother had packed 5 children into a wagon before dawn and driven west without a word to anyone, and how she had said only one thing the entire first day of travel, which was, "We are not going back." Silas listened without moving. His eyes stayed on Josie's face, then moved occasionally to the bend in the creek, then back. He had the quality of a man who could be completely still, which Josie found both reassuring and unsettling, because she could not tell what he was thinking behind that stillness. "Emmett Crane," he said when she finished. "You know him." He was quiet for a moment that lasted exactly 1 beat too long. "I know of him," he said. "Then you know what kind of man he is." "I know what kind of man he is," Silas agreed. Sam had come closer during Josie's telling. He was standing about 4 feet off Silas's left shoulder, now arms crossed, his posture radiating the particular brand of watchful hostility that Sam had apparently been born with and had been refining ever since. "If you know about Crane," he said, "then you know that those men around that bend aren't regular hired hands. They're not going to walk away because a rancher asks them to." "No," Silas said. "They won't." "So what's the plan?" Silas looked at him. "You got a lot of nerve for a 9-year-old. "My mama is tied up around that rock," Sam said. "I don't have time for anything but nerve." Something shifted in Silas's expression, not softening exactly, but a kind of acknowledgement, like a man recognizing something he'd seen before in a mirror. He turned back to Josie. "How many men did you see?" "Sam saw 2, but Crane doesn't travel with 2. "No," Silas said. "He doesn't." He moved to his saddlebag and pulled out a canteen which he handed to Josie without comment. She took it and got more water into Lily, who drank with the desperate gulping urgency of a sick baby who hadn't had enough fluid since morning. Silas watched the infant for a moment, and his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "She needs that willow bark. I've got it at the ranch." "Your ranch is how far?" 2 miles north, but we're not going to the ranch yet." Josie looked up sharply. "If Crane has your mother, and he knows you children are loose in this canyon," Silas said, "then the moment he figures out which direction you ran, he'll send men after you. 2 miles is not far enough to outrun a man on horseback if he already knows which way to look." "So we need to get Mama first," Josie said. "We need to know what we're walking into first," Silas said. "Which means I need to get eyes around that bend before we move anyone." "I already looked," Sam said. "You looked from the outside of the rock. I need to look from the inside." He turned to Josie. "Can you keep Lily quiet for 20 minutes?" Josie looked at her baby sister. Lily's eyes were glassy and half-lidded, her mouth working in that slow, distressed way that meant she was too exhausted even to cry properly. It was the kind of quiet that was worse than crying. "I'll keep her quiet," Josie said. "Stay at the tree line. Don't move until I come back." He looked at Sam. "That includes you." Sam's jaw set. "And if you don't come back?" It was the question an adult would ask. A sensible, strategic adult who was thinking 2 steps ahead and accounting for every possibility. Silas looked at this 9-year-old boy and felt the weight of it, the strange and awful competence that hard circumstances manufactured in children who should have been worried about nothing more serious than the summer harvest. "If I'm not back in 20 minutes, Silas said, "you take your sisters and the baby and you head north along the canyon wall. Stay off the open ground. There's a ranch house at the base of the ridge red roof. You'll see it from the high ground. Tell whoever's there that Silas Turner sent you." "Can you do that?" "Silas Turner?" Sam repeated, committing it. "That's right. And our mama." The question sat between them. Silas did not look away from it. 20 minutes, he said. "I'll be back in 20. He was back in 14. Josie knew from the set of his shoulders before he even reached them that what he had seen was not good. He moved faster than he had gone in, and he went straight to his saddlebag and pulled out the Winchester without preamble and checked the load with the automatic efficiency of a man who had done it enough times that his hands didn't require his brain's participation. "How many?" Josie said. 4 men. 2 I could see originally, 2 more with the horses farther back. He looked at her. "Your mother is on her feet. She's not hurt." The relief hit Josie so hard her knees actually buckled, and she caught herself on the mare's flank. She pressed her free hand to her mouth for exactly 2 seconds, then straightened. "Okay," she said. "Okay. There's something else." She looked at him. "The man giving orders up there, the one with the gray coat and the silver band on his hat." He paused. "That's not hired help." "Who is it?" Silas met her eyes. "That's Emmett Crane himself." The name landed like a stone in still water and sent ripples through all of them. Rose whimpered. Sam went very white and then very still in the particular way that meant he was furious and controlling it. Josie's hand tightened around the canteen until her knuckles ached. "He followed us," she said. It came out like a statement, but it was really the moment she understood something she had been trying not to understand for 3 weeks, that they had not been running fast enough, that Crane had not been following at a distance out of convenience, but had been tracking them with patience and intention, that the whole journey west had not been an escape so much as a slow narrowing of the trap. "He's not here by coincidence," Silas said. "A man like Crane doesn't ride into Colorado Hill Country himself, unless what he's after is worth riding for personally." "Why would he—" Josie stopped. Her eyes cut to Sam, and Sam looked back at her, and something passed between them that Silas could see but not read. "What does he want with Mama?" she asked, but the way she asked it told Silas she already had a theory and didn't like it. "That's what I intend to find out," he said. "But right now I need you to listen to me very carefully, because we don't have time for anything but the right decisions." He crouched down so he was at Violet and Rose's eye level, a gesture that surprised Josie, because it was not the gesture of a man who was in the habit of crouching for children. "You too," he said. His voice went different, not softer exactly, but stripped of its urgency, made plain and calm the way you'd speak to a spooked horse. "What are your names again?" "Violet," said Violet, who had stopped crying and was back to watching him with those enormous gray eyes. "Rose," said Rose in a voice barely above a breath. "Violet and Rose," he said. "I'm going to need you to be the bravest you've ever been today. Can you do that for your mama?" Rose looked at Violet. Violet looked at Rose. Some wordless negotiation occurred. "Yes, sir," Violet said for both of them. He stood up. He looked at Josie. "Here's what's going to happen," he said, and he told her the plan in the clear, organized way of a man who had thought it through completely in the 14 minutes he had been gone. He would go back around the bend, but not the way he'd come. He knew a cut in the rock wall above the creek that came out on a ledge overlooking the far side of the bend. He'd used it twice, once for a runaway steer, and once for reasons he did not explain. From there, he could get eyes directly down on Crane's position and get a clear read on the situation before he made any move. What he needed from Josie was a distraction, not a dangerous one. Not one that put her in any man's reach. Just sound from this side of the bend enough to pull attention in the wrong direction for 30 seconds. "I can do that," Josie said. "I know you can." He said it with the simple directness of a man making a plain observation, and Josie felt it land somewhere in her chest that had been hollow for weeks, the strange, unexpected comfort of being believed in by someone who didn't have to. "What happens if things go wrong?" Sam asked. "Define wrong. What if there are more than 4 men? What if they—" Sam paused. "What if they hurt her before you can get to her?" Silas looked at him for a long moment. He did not offer a false reassurance. Josie appreciated that in the way you could appreciate a hard thing for being honest. "Then I'll do what needs to be done with a different set of circumstances," he said. "But I've been in worse situations than 4 men and a canyon, and I'm still here." Sam considered this. "Why do you know how to do this?" he asked. "You're a rancher." "I wasn't always a rancher." Sam's eyes narrowed. "What were you before?" Someone who learned things it would have been better not to need to know. He picked up the Winchester and looked at Josie. 10 minutes. Stay put until you hear my signal." "What's your signal?" "You'll know it," he said, and moved. He was right. She knew it. 8 minutes later, a sharp whistle came from above the rock wall, 2 short notes and 1 long, and Josie drew breath and made the biggest noise she could, which turned out to be her brother's name, screamed at the top of her lungs, with a raw, ragged edge that required no acting whatsoever because it came from the same place as the scream she'd made at the creek bank. Pure fear, pure desperation, the sound of a child who had run out of everything. "Sam, Sam, help me." She heard movement from around the bend. Boots on rock, voices low and fast, men orienting toward her. She pressed herself back against the canyon wall with Lily clutched to her chest, one hand over the baby's mouth, as gently as she could manage, her heart slamming against her ribs so hard she could feel it in her teeth. Then came the sound of a scuffle, something heavy hitting rock. A man's voice raised in shock rather than aggression, a single sharp command in Silas's voice that Josie couldn't make out but felt in her bones as authority, and then silence. Then, "Josie Carter." Silas's voice clear and controlled coming from around the bend. "You can come now. She moved before she consciously decided to. Sam caught her arm. "Wait," he said. His voice was tight. "We don't know what's, That's him," Josie said. "I know his voice." "You've known him 40 minutes. "I know his voice," she said again, and she pulled free. She came around the bend and stopped. Two of Crane's men were on the ground. Not dead, she could see one of them moving, and the other two were backed against the far rock wall with their hands up, and expressions that suggested they had severely miscalculated what they were walking into when they'd followed a wagon trail west from Kansas. Silas stood with the Winchester, and an expression that was not angry exactly, but entirely without mercy. And there, off to the left, with her wrist still bound in front of her, and a cut on her chin that made Josie's stomach turn over, was Emmeline Carter. Josie ran. Lily cried out as she jostled, and Josie was saying, "Mama, Mama, Mama," before she even reached her. The word coming out in that broken, helpless way it came out of children when they had been holding everything together for far too long, and have finally reached the one person in the world they were holding it together for. Emmeline caught her with her bound hands and pulled her in arms up and over Josie's head, and she said, "I've got you, baby, I've got you," in the voice that Josie had been hearing in her head for 3 weeks as the voice of something she might never get back. "Mama." Josie was crying now all the way, crying, not trying to stop it. "I found your shoes. I found your shoes, and I thought, I know." Emmeline was shaking. She was trying to hide it, but Josie could feel it. "I know you did. You did exactly right." Lily reached out one small fist from between them and grabbed Emmeline's sleeve with the blind, certain grip of an infant who has found what it was looking for, and Emmeline made a sound that was not quite a word, just a sound. The sound of a mother feeling her baby's weight again after believing she might not. Silas said without turning, "Can someone cut these ropes?" Sam was already there, his pocket knife out, working at the knot with practiced hands. He didn't say anything to his mother. He just worked at the rope until it gave. And when Emmeline's hands came free, Sam pressed his face against her side for exactly 3 seconds, and then stepped back and folded his knife closed, and looked anywhere but at the other people present. The 2 men against the wall hadn't moved. One of the men on the ground had stopped moving altogether. Silas kept his eyes on all of them, with the even watchful attention of a man who knew that the most dangerous moment was the one right after the crisis when everyone assumed the danger was over. Because Emmett Crane was not here. Josie looked around the space. 4 men. Horses. Her mother. And the absence of one specific gray coat and one specific silver-banded hat that Silas had described with his own eyes not 20 minutes ago. "Where is he?" she asked. Silas's jaw tightened. "He was here when I came over the ridge." "He's gone now." "Yes." "He ran?" Sam asked. "Emmett Crane doesn't run," Silas said, and his voice carried something in it that made everyone in earshot go very still. "He repositions." He turned and looked at Josie, and his eyes held the one thing she had not yet seen in them, the thing she had not expected from a man this controlled and certain. He looked at her, and she saw that he was worried. "We need to move," he said. "Right now. All of us." They moved. Emmeline didn't ask questions. That was the thing about her that Josie had always understood in her bones, without being able to name it. Her mother had a gift for reading the temperature of a moment, and the temperature of this particular moment was unmistakable. She took Rose from Sam's side without being asked. Settled the 5-year-old against her hip with the ease of a woman who had been carrying children since she was barely more than one herself, and looked at Silas with clear, direct eyes. "Which way?" she said. "North along the wall," Silas said. "Stay tight to the rock. Don't cross open ground." "The children." "I know." He was already moving Winchester in hand, one eye on the bend behind them and one on the path ahead. "Stay behind me. Keep pace." Sam fell in beside Emmeline without being told. Violet took her mother's free hand and held it with both of hers, gripping so hard her knuckles were white, and did not let go. Josie shifted Lily to her other hip and followed, and the 6 of them moved along the base of the canyon wall in tight, urgent formation. The kind of grouping that had no name, but that every person who has ever been in danger with people they love instinctively understands. They had covered maybe 200 yards when Lily coughed. It was not a small cough. It was the deep rattling kind that came from somewhere down in her chest. And it went on long enough that Josie stopped moving, her whole body going rigid with the particular terror of watching a baby struggle to breathe. Lily pulled in a wet, ragged breath after it, and then another, and Josie pressed her lips to the top of the baby's head and kept walking because stopping was not an option, even though every instinct she had was screaming at her to stop. "How long has she had that cough?" Emmeline said. Her voice was controlled, but her eyes on Lily were not. "Since this morning," Josie said. "It's gotten worse." "Why didn't you—" Emmeline stopped herself. She had started to say, "Why didn't you tell me?" And the answer to that question was obvious, and broke something in her face briefly before she sealed it back up. "Because you weren't there to tell." "We need to get her somewhere warm," she said instead. "The ranch," Silas said without turning around. 20 minutes if we keep moving." "She may not have 20 minutes of this," Emmeline said. He turned then, long enough to look at Lily's face. Whatever he saw there tightened his expression. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small folded cloth, the kind used for cleaning a rifle, and shook it open. "Tie this around her chest," he said, handing it to Emmeline. "Keeps the warmth in. It's not medicine, but it helps." Emmeline took it without comment and worked it around Lily's small torso with practiced hands, while Josie held the baby still, and then they were moving again faster now, Silas setting a pace that made the children work to keep up. It was Sam who heard it first. "Stop!" His voice was low and flat, and it had the quality of absolute certainty, so they stopped. All of them instantly, without question. That was the strange authority of a child who had earned the right to be listened to. Sam stood with his head tilted, listening to something none of the others could hear yet, and then they all heard it hoofbeats coming not from behind them, but from ahead from the north, which was exactly the direction they had been told to run. Silas said one word very quietly. "Back." "He cut ahead of us," Sam said. "Yes." "He knew which way we'd go." "Yes." Silas turned to Emmeline. His eyes were quick and assessing. "Is there anyone in Crane's operation who knows this canyon?" Emmeline's face changed. Something moved across it. Guilt recognition, the expression of a person connecting a dot they had been refusing to connect. "He has a man," she said slowly. "A man named Holt, Jedediah Holt. He rode scout for the army before Crane hired him. He knows every piece of country between here and the New Mexico border." "What does Holt look like?" "Thin, red beard, rides a blue roan." Silas turned back toward the canyon. His jaw was working. "The fourth man," he said quietly to himself, rather than to any of them. "The one with the horses." He looked at Josie. "The man who had the horses when I came over the ridge. Red beard." Josie had not looked closely. She had looked at her mother, and nothing else. "Sam," she said. Sam thought for exactly 2 seconds. "Couldn't see his beard from where I was. But the roan horse, yes. There was a blue roan." Silas said a word under his breath that he immediately appeared to regret saying in front of children. Rose looked up at him with wide eyes. "Pardon," he said to Rose with a reflexive courtesy that was almost comic under the circumstances. And then he turned and looked at Emmeline and said, "Holt left before I came over the ridge. He went north. He's been scouting our exit this whole time. So Crane sent the others to hold me," Emmeline said. She said it slowly, working it out, while Holt found the route. "And now Crane is coming from the north, and we've got the men from the bend somewhere behind us, and we are standing in the middle." He was quiet for a moment. The hoofbeats from the north were getting louder. "How many children can run?" he said to Emmeline. "Sam and Josie can run," Emmeline said. "Violet, if you take her hand. Rose." She looked at her 5-year-old who had buried her face in Emmeline's neck and was trembling. "Rose won't let go of me." "Then you carry Rose. Josie keeps Lily. Sam takes Violet." He pointed east toward a cut in the canyon wall that Josie had not noticed until this moment. A narrow gap maybe 3 feet wide in the rock that could have been a shadow from most angles. That cut goes through to the east side. It's tight and it's rough, but a horse can't follow you through it. Half a mile out you hit the open valley, and there's a farmhouse, the Delacroix place. You tell Margaret Delacroix that Silas Turner sent you and that you need shelter. She'll give it." "You're not coming," Emmeline said. It was not a question. Someone has to slow Crane down. "Alone." "I've been alone for 4 years," Silas said. "I'm used to it." Emmeline looked at him for a long, wordless moment. Something passed across her face that was not just gratitude and not just fear. Something more complicated than both. "You don't have to," she started. "Ma'am?" He said it gently, but it stopped her. "Get your children through that cut. That's what you have to do right now." Josie looked at Silas, and then at her mother, and then back at Silas. And she felt the full terrible weight of what was happening. A man she had known for less than 2 hours was about to face down Emmett Crane and his remaining men alone, so that her family could reach a farmhouse half a mile away. She did not have words for what that was. She had no category for it. "Don't die," she said. It came out simpler than she intended, stripped down to the plain fact of what she needed from him. Silas looked at her. The corners of his eyes moved in a way that was not quite a smile, but was in the same neighborhood. "I'll do my best," he said. "That is not reassuring," Sam said. "No," Silas agreed. "It's not. Go." They went. The cut in the rock was exactly as tight and rough as Silas had described. Josie went first with Lily turning sideways in the narrowest sections, feeling the rock face press against her shoulder blades, while she kept the baby angled away from the walls. She could hear Sam behind her talking Violet through each step in a low, steady murmur. "Right foot here. Left hand on this ledge. That's it. You're fine. Keep going." And behind them Emmeline with Rose, who had stopped making noise entirely, which was somehow worse than crying. They were 30 feet into the cut when the first shot rang out behind them. All 5 of them stopped. Josie turned as much as the rock allowed. She could see nothing but the narrow strip of canyon they'd come from, and nothing was moving in it, but the shot had come from somewhere close, and it had been answered immediately by another from a different direction, and she knew without being able to see it that Silas Turner had just made contact with Emmett Crane. "Keep moving," Emmeline said. Her voice was absolutely steady. "Keep moving, Josie. He's Josie." Emmeline's eyes locked onto hers through the narrow space. "He bought us time. We honor that by using it. Move." Josie moved. They came out the other side into open air, and Emmeline counted children with her eyes before the dust had even settled Josie, Sam, Violet, Rose, Lily. And then she said, "Run," and they ran. The farmhouse materialized out of the valley haze in a way that felt almost hallucinatory, because Josie had stopped believing in farmhouses, had stopped believing in anything with 4 solid walls and a roof and a door, had been operating for 3 weeks on the logic of pure movement and survival. She ran toward it anyway, and she beat on the door with her free hand, Lily bouncing against her chest, and when the door opened, she was looking at a woman of maybe 60, with flour on her apron, and gray braids, and eyes that went from startled to assessing, to decided in about half a second. "Silas Turner sent us," Josie gasped. "He said to tell you." "I heard the shots," the woman said. "Get inside, all of you, now." Margaret Delacroix was a practical woman in the specific way of women who have been managing frontier life without assistance for long enough that practicality has become indistinguishable from personality. She had the children inside and the door barred before Emmeline had finished crossing the threshold, and she had Lily in her arms and a dampened cloth on the baby's forehead 30 seconds after that, clucking softly to herself in a way that managed to be both worried and competent. "Fever's high," she said. "How long?" "Since yesterday morning," Emmeline said. "Willow bark tea. I have it." She was already moving. "Sit down before you fall down, all of you." Emmeline sat. She pulled Violet and Rose onto her lap simultaneously and wrapped her arms around both of them and pressed her face into Violet's hair, and she stayed like that for a long moment without speaking, breathing them in. Sam stood at the window. He had not sat down. He was watching the direction they'd come from. "You should sit," Josie said. "I'm watching for him." "Sam, I'm watching for him, Josie." His voice had the pressed flat quality again, everything stored in the jaw. "If he comes out of that cut, I want to know it. And if he doesn't—" He stopped. He did not finish that sentence. He didn't need to. Josie went and stood beside him at the window. They stood there together, these two oldest children of Emmeline Carter, and they watched, and neither of them said anything, because there was nothing useful to say, and the silence had its own kind of weight. It was 11 minutes before the figure appeared at the far edge of the valley. Sam saw it first. His posture changed, a tightening across the shoulders, an elevation of the chin. Josie saw his hands come up and grip the windowsill. She looked where he was looking, and she saw the horse first, then the man on it, and she held her breath for the 3 seconds it took to resolve the shape into something recognizable. Silas Turner rode out of the cut on his gray mare at a walk. The Winchester was in the saddle scabbard. His left arm was pressed close to his side in a way that was not how a man usually rode. "He's hurt," Sam said. "He's riding," Josie said. "He's hurt," Sam said again, and before Josie could reach for him, he had the front door unbarred and was out of it, running across the valley toward the approaching horse at a dead sprint, this 9-year-old boy who had appointed himself the designated skeptic of all adults, and who was now running full tilt toward the one adult who had shown up when it mattered. Josie started after him. Margaret Delacroix caught her elbow from behind. "Let the boy go," she said not unkindly. "Some things need to happen without an audience." Josie stopped. She watched through the window as Sam reached the horse and pulled up short, and she watched Silas look down at him from the saddle, and she watched Sam say something she couldn't hear. It couldn't read his lips from this distance. And she watched Silas answer, and then she watched Sam reach up and take hold of the mare's bridle and walk her the rest of the way to the farmhouse like he'd been doing it his whole life. Emmeline appeared at Josie's shoulder. She had come silently, leaving Violet and Rose with Margaret, and now she stood at the window beside her daughter and watched her son lead a wounded man to shelter. "He's bleeding," Emmeline said quietly. Her voice had something in it that Josie had never heard before, or hadn't heard since before their father died. The sound of a woman who has run out of the ability to be only a mother, who is feeling something additionally human and unruly and inconvenient in the middle of a crisis. "He came back," Josie said. "He came back," Emmeline agreed. Then the door opened, and Sam's voice came through ahead of him, with the particular tone of a boy who has information and knows it's critical. "He took out Crane's men, but Crane got away. He says we've got maybe 2 hours before Crane regroups, and we need to know right now if we're staying here or if we're moving again." Silas stepped through the door behind him, his left hand pressed to his side and his face set in the controlled way of a man managing pain by not acknowledging it. His eyes found Emmeline first. "Mrs. Carter," he said. "Mr. Turner." She crossed the room and took hold of his arm before anyone could object. "Sit down," she said in a voice that did not leave room for argument. "I need to see that wound." "It's not—" "Mr. Turner." She looked up at him, and her eyes held the steady, immovable authority of a woman who has made a decision and is not available for negotiation. "Sit down." He sat. And somewhere in the 2 hours that followed, in the quiet efficiency of Margaret Delacroix's kitchen, with willow bark tea working on Lily's fever, and Sam keeping watch at the window, and Violet and Rose asleep together on the settle, Josie Carter sat across from the man who had walked into a canyon for her family, and she thought about what her mother had said that first morning of their flight from Kansas, standing in the dark beside a loaded wagon with 5 sleeping children. "There are men in this world who take, and men who give, and you will know them by what they do when it costs them something." She looked at Silas Turner's face tight with pain. He wasn't complaining about answering Sam's quiet tactical questions with patient honesty, watching her mother's hands as she worked, and looking away again quickly each time Emmeline glanced up. She knew which kind of man he was. Outside somewhere in the Colorado Hill Country, Emmett Crane was regrouping, and the clock was running. The 2 hours ran out in 90 minutes. Sam saw the dust first, a column of it rising from the south ridge, moving fast and deliberate in the way that dust only moved when there were multiple horses beneath it. He said nothing for a moment, just stood at the window, counting, and then he turned and said, "There are more of them this time." And the room went still in the particular way of people receiving information they had been dreading. Silas was on his feet before Sam finished the sentence, which was impressive, considering that Emmeline had pulled a bullet fragment from his left side 40 minutes earlier, with a sewing needle and a steadiness of hand that had made even Margaret Delacroix raise an eyebrow. He crossed to the window and looked, and what he saw made him turn immediately to Margaret. "How many people can you reach within a half-mile?" he said. Margaret did not blink. "The Harlan brothers are one ridge east. Caleb Pratt is south of them. The Ochoa family is down the valley." She paused. "Pete Delacroix, my son, rides a circuit of the properties every afternoon. He should be coming back through in about 20 minutes. Can you signal him early?" "The bell on the fence post," she said. 3 rings means trouble. He's known it since he was 8 years old." "Ring it," Silas said. She was out the back before he finished saying it. They heard the bell 1, 2, 3, clear and urgent in the afternoon air, and then she was back inside pulling a shotgun from the rack above the fireplace with the ease of a woman who had been doing exactly that for 40 years. Emmeline had Violet and Rose in the back room, their shoes off, tucked under quilts with strict instructions to stay flat and quiet, no matter what they heard. She came back out with her jaw set and her eyes clear. "What do you need from me?" she said to Silas. He looked at her. In another situation, in another set of circumstances, the look might have been more than assessment. Right now, it was purely practical, but it held something underneath the practicality that Josie, watching from across the room, catalogued and filed away. "You know Crane," he said. "Better than anyone here. If he comes to that door, what does he want most, your compliance or your fear?" Emmeline considered this with the focused, deliberate calm of a woman who had been thinking about Emmett Crane for 3 years and had reached some conclusions she did not enjoy. "He wants to be seen as reasonable," she said. "He'll come to the door offering terms before he does anything else. He always offers terms first. It makes him feel like the law is on his side even when it isn't. Then we let him offer terms. And then we give him an answer he wasn't expecting." Before Emmeline could ask what that meant, the front yard filled with horses. Crane knocked. That was the thing that made the hair stand up on Josie's arms. He knocked 3 measured raps on Margaret Delacroix's door, the way a man knocks when he considers himself a guest rather than an invader. The confidence of it was obscene. Silas opened the door. Emmett Crane was shorter than Josie had imagined. She had built him up in 3 weeks of running into something large and formless and everywhere, and the reality of him was a man of medium height in an expensive gray coat, with a silver band on his hat, and the eyes of someone who had never once in his life been told no in a way that stuck. He looked at Silas with the mild, careful expression of a man evaluating an obstacle. "Mr. Turner," he said pleasantly. Silas said nothing. "I believe you have something of mine," Crane said. "I don't recall you owning people, Crane." "I own a debt." He smiled, and the smile was the most frightening thing about him because it was entirely genuine. He found this enjoyable. "Mrs. Carter and her late husband borrowed considerably from my operation. That debt has not been resolved. I am simply here to discuss terms of resolution." He glanced past Silas's shoulder into the room and found Emmeline. He nodded at her with a courtesy so precise it was its own kind of threat. "Mrs. Carter." Emmeline did not answer him. The debt, Silas said, drawing Crane's eyes back to him, was $3,000 originally. "I'm told you've been claiming it's now $11,000. Crane's smile did not waver. "Interest accrues, Mr. Turner. That's the nature of..." "The nature of fraud," Silas said, "is that it doesn't hold up in a federal court. And it happens that I know the federal land commissioner in Denver personally. We served together in the 7th Cavalry. He's been looking for cause to open an inquiry into your lending practices in 4 counties for about 2 years now." He paused. "I wrote him a letter this morning." The smile stayed on Crane's face, but something behind it shifted a tectonic thing slow and deep. "You couldn't have," he said. "You've been in a canyon all..." "Margaret Delacroix's son rode to town 2 hours ago," Silas said. He's a fast rider, and the telegraph office opens at 7. It was a bluff. Pete Delacroix had not yet arrived, let alone ridden to town. Josie knew it, and Sam knew it, and Emmeline almost certainly knew it, and she watched every person in the room hold the knowledge of the bluff inside them, like a held breath, showing nothing. Crane studied Silas for a long moment. His eyes moved to Emmeline, then to the children, then back to Silas, calculating. "You're bluffing," he said. "I might be," Silas said. "Do you feel lucky enough to find out?" The bell on the fence post rang. 3 rings, then 3 more. And from the east, the sound of additional hoofbeats, not Crane's men, who were already in the yard, but something else, multiple riders coming at speed from the direction of the neighboring properties. The Harlan brothers arrived first. 2 men in their 30s on matching bay horses, rifles across their saddle pommels, taking in the situation with the quick, comprehensive read of men who had seen range disputes before and knew the shape of one. Behind them came a rider. Josie didn't know, young and dark-haired, who she would learn later was Caleb Pratt, 22 years old and already furious on general principle. And behind him, finally, Pete Delacroix himself, a solid man of 35, who looked at his mother in the doorway and at the gray-coated stranger in the yard and at the 6 hired men on horseback and visibly decided which side he was on in approximately 1 second. Crane's men shifted in their saddles. The mathematics of the situation had changed. "This isn't finished," Crane said. He was still looking at Silas. The pleasantness had drained out of him entirely, leaving something colder and more honest underneath. "A letter to Denver isn't a conviction. A few neighbors with rifles isn't a court of law." "No," Silas agreed. "But it's a start." Crane held his gaze for one more long moment. Then he turned his horse smoothly without visible hurry, and his men turned with him, and they rode out of the yard, the way they had come, controlled, unhurried, making sure everyone watching understood that they were choosing to leave rather than being driven out. Everyone watched them go. The yard was quiet. Then Pete Delacroix said, "Somebody want to tell me what just happened?" And his mother said, "Inside Pete." And that was the end of the immediate crisis, though not the end of the fear, because everyone present understood that Emmett Crane riding away was not Emmett Crane giving up. It was Emmett Crane regrouping again. They made it to Silas's ranch before dark. The whole group of them, Emmeline and the 5 children. Silas on his mare, Pete Delacroix riding escort until the property line arrived at the ranch house in the amber light of the late afternoon. And Josie's first clear thought when she saw it was that it was a house that had been lived in alone for too long. Not neglected exactly. The fences were sound and the porch was swept, but quiet in a particular way, the kind of quiet that settled into walls and furniture when there was no one to disturb it. Silas opened the door and stood back without ceremony, and Emmeline carried Rose through it, and Josie followed with Lily. And Sam paused at the threshold and looked at Silas with that measuring expression he had never fully relinquished. "You've been here alone," Sam said. 4 years, Silas said. "Why?" Silas considered the question with the genuine respect it deserved, coming from a 9-year-old, who asked things directly because he hadn't yet learned to be indirect about what he needed to know. "I had a family," he said. "Lost them. Didn't see the point in most things after that." Sam took that in. "What changed your mind?" Silas looked past him into the house where Emmeline was settling Rose on the settle and Josie was murmuring to Lily. And Violet was exploring the perimeter of the front room with the careful, contained curiosity of a child who has been told too many times not to touch things. He looked at all of it for a moment. "Ask me in a few days," he said. Sam held his gaze for 3 seconds, then nodded once and walked inside. The ranch house absorbed the Carter family the way a dry riverbed absorbs rain completely immediately, as if there had always been a shape waiting for exactly this. Emmeline found the kitchen and took quiet possession of it. Josie laid Lily in the center of the bed in the small back room and sat beside her, and held her tiny hand while the willow bark tea Margaret Delacroix had sent with them did its work, and she watched her baby sister's color slowly improve from frightening to merely worrying, and she breathed for what felt like the first time in 3 weeks. Sam found Silas in the barn an hour later. He didn't announce himself. He just came and sat on a hay bale and watched Silas check the mare's legs with practiced hands, and after a while Sam said, "You need help with the evening feeding." Silas looked up. "You know horses." "My father kept 2, before he got sick." "Then yes," Silas said. "I could use the help." They worked together without much talking, which suited both of them, and in the working. Something shifted between them. Not the dramatic declared kind of shift, but the slow, sturdy kind that comes from doing a practical thing alongside someone and finding that the rhythms match. Sam fed and watered with the competence of a boy who had been taught properly, and Silas watched him without making a show of it, and neither of them mentioned what had happened in the canyon, or what was still unresolved, or the fact that Emmett Crane was still out there somewhere. The twist came at dinner. Emmeline had made what she could from Silas's sparse stores, and they were all seated around a table that had not had people at it in 4 years. And Violet was telling a long, elaborate story about something that had happened at the creek bank that morning that involved a frog, and a contested opinion between her and Rose about whether frogs were friendly, and for approximately 4 minutes, the table was loud and warm and ordinary, in a way that made something in Silas's face go unguarded and raw, before he got it back under control. Then Pete Delacroix arrived at the door with news. He had ridden to town after all, not because Silas had claimed it, but because he'd made his own decision on the ride home, and the news he brought back from the telegraph office was not what any of them had expected. There was already a federal warrant out for Emmett Crane. Had been for 6 weeks out of Dodge City. The charge was not fraud. The charge was human trafficking, the movement of women and children across state lines under coerced circumstances, using fraudulent debt instruments as leverage. The investigation had been opened by a deputy federal marshal named Grace Ellison, one of the first women to hold that office in the Western Territories, who had been building the case since the previous winter. Emmeline set down her spoon and said nothing for a very long moment. "He wasn't just coming for the debt," Josie said. She said it slowly, the pieces arranging themselves with a sick, clarifying precision. "He was coming for... He needed us to disappear," Emmeline said. Her voice was completely flat. "Not to collect, to disappear, before the investigation reached us." "Your witnesses," Silas said. He was looking at Emmeline with an expression of careful, controlled anger. "You and the children. You've seen his operation. You know the names." "I know more than names," Emmeline said. "I have papers, documents he sent when he thought I couldn't read them properly." She looked up. "I kept everything. 3 years of everything. It's sewn into the lining of my travel bag." The table was completely silent. Pete Delacroix cleared his throat. "The Marshal Ellison. She's already in the territory. She came in from Pueblo 4 days ago. She's been looking for witnesses." He paused. "She's been looking for your family, specifically Mrs. Carter. Your name is in the case file." Emmeline pressed both hands flat on the table and looked at them. Then she looked at Josie, who looked back at her, and in that look passed everything 3 weeks of running. 5 children, a wagon, abandoned in Kansas, a pair of shoes in the creek mud, and the long, terrible arc of running from a man who had been not just a creditor, but something far more dangerous. "We weren't running away from him," Josie said quietly. "We were running toward this." "Your mother was running toward this," Silas said. He was looking at Emmeline when he said it. She just didn't know it yet. Emmeline raised her eyes to his. The kitchen was warm and the children were quiet, and outside the Colorado night was settling over the ranch, and she said, "I kept everything because I knew someday it would matter. I just didn't know if I'd live to see it." "You lived," Silas said. "We lived," she said, and it came out softer than she had intended, with the full weight of what we meant in that moment. Not just herself, but all 5 of her children, and this man across the table, who had come down into a canyon for them, and the inexplicable stubborn fact that they were all here whole at a table with food on it, when they should not have been. Rose looked up from her plate. "Is the bad man going to come back?" she asked, with the directness of a 5-year-old who had been listening to everything, even when the adults believed otherwise. The table looked at Silas. Silas looked at Rose. "No, ma'am," he said, with the plain, deliberate certainty of a man who is making a promise rather than offering a comfort. "He is not." Rose considered this. Then she picked up her spoon and went back to eating, satisfied in the absolute way of a child who has decided to believe something, and that was the moment the table exhaled. All of them together, the long-held breath of the day finally releasing. And Violet went back to her frog story, and Sam asked Silas another question about the horses, and Lily from the back room where she was sleeping made the small contented sound of a baby whose fever had broken. Outside, the first stars were coming up over the Colorado Ridge. Inside the table was loud with children. And Silas Turner, who had eaten alone for 4 years, sat at the head of it and said nothing and felt everything. Marshal Grace Ellison arrived the next morning before breakfast. She rode alone, which was itself a statement. A woman in her early 40s on a black horse, a federal badge on her coat, and a Winchester across her saddle, and the expression of someone who had been doing this long enough to have stopped being surprised by anything. She pulled up at the gate of Silas's ranch and called out her name and her office and waited, which was the courtesy of a person who understood that a family that had been running for 3 weeks might shoot first at an unannounced visitor. Silas opened the door. He looked at her for a moment, then at the badge, then back at her face. "You're Ellison," he said. "I am," she said. "Pete Delacroix found me last night. Told me where you were." She glanced past him into the house. "Is Emmeline Carter here?" "She is." "Then I'd like to speak with her, if she's willing." Silas stepped back from the door. "Come in, Marshal." Emmeline was already standing in the middle of the front room when Ellison entered, her travel bag in her hands, the one she had carried every mile from Kansas. She had opened the lining the night before after the children were in bed, and laid the documents on the kitchen table for the first time since she'd sewn them in 3 years of Crane's correspondence. His loan instruments, his ledgers. A list of names she had copied in her own hand from a book she'd found in his office the winter he'd come to collect, and she'd been left alone in the building for 11 minutes. 11 minutes had been enough. She had always been a fast reader and a precise one. She had written down every name on that list from memory, that same night, sitting in the dark of her own kitchen after the children were asleep, because she had known even then that the day would come when she would need it. Ellison sat down at the kitchen table and opened the first document and was quiet for a very long time. Josie stood in the doorway to the back hall. Sam stood beside her. Neither of them breathed loudly. "How many people are on this list?" Ellison said finally without looking up. 41, Emmeline said. 41 women and children that I personally know of. There may be more." Ellison looked up. Her eyes were steady and gray and entirely without performance. "Mrs. Carter," she said, "do you understand what you've done here?" "I kept records," Emmeline said. "That's all. You kept records that 3 separate federal investigations have been trying to reconstruct for 2 years. Ellison set the paper down carefully. "This is enough. Not just for Crane. For everyone in this network." She paused. "You took an extraordinary risk keeping this." "I had children," Emmeline said. The risk of not keeping it was larger. Sam made a sound beside Josie, not a word, just a small compressed sound that she understood completely, because she felt it too. The particular pride in your chest that comes from hearing your mother say something that reveals the full size of who she is. Ellison stayed for 2 hours. She asked precise, methodical questions and wrote the answers in a small leather notebook. And Emmeline answered everything without hesitation, without emotion, in the clear, organized way of someone who had been rehearsing this conversation in her head for 3 years and was finally having it. Silas brought coffee and stayed out of the way, which Josie appreciated because it was exactly what the moment needed. When it was done, Ellison closed her notebook. "I have 4 deputies riding in from Pueblo today," she said. "Crane is still in the territory. We tracked him to a settlement 8 miles south last night. With what you've given me, I can arrest him on federal charges. He won't be able to buy his way out of this one." She looked at Emmeline directly. "You'll need to testify." "I know," Emmeline said. "It won't be comfortable." "No," Emmeline said. It won't. I'll do it anyway. Ellison nodded once the nod of a woman recognizing another woman who has made a decision and will not be moved from it. She stood, buttoned her coat, and picked up her hat. At the door she stopped and turned back. "Mrs. Carter," she said. "I've been building this case for 2 years. I have testimony from 11 women. I have financial records and affidavits and a great deal of circumstantial evidence." She paused. "What you kept in that bag is the difference between a conviction and an acquittal. I want you to know that." Emmeline said nothing. She nodded. Ellison left. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Rose appeared from the back hall, where she had apparently been listening through the gap in the door, because Rose was 5 years old, and 5-year-olds had their own intelligence network, and she said, "Is Mama a hero?" Silas looked at Emmeline. Emmeline looked at the floor. "Yes," Josie said. "She is." Emmett Crane was arrested that afternoon. Pete Delacroix rode back to the ranch at 4 o'clock with the news delivered with the flat factual satisfaction of a man who has watched something necessary happen. Crane had been found at the settlement to the south, just as Ellison had said. He had not gone quietly. There was a detailed account of exactly how, not quietly, he had gone, which Pete edited significantly for the presence of children, but he was in federal custody now. His men with him and Jedediah Holt had been taken separately at the county line, trying to cross into New Mexico. Sam received this information standing in the barn doorway with a curry comb in his hand and said, "Good," in a voice that carried the full weight of 3 weeks of fear and running and holding himself together. And then he turned back to the horse he was grooming and continued working, because Sam Carter processed things in motion and always had. Josie was on the porch when she heard. She sat down on the step and put her face in her hands and did not cry because she had run out of tears somewhere around the 48th hour and had not fully restocked, but she breathed in and out and let the news settle into her body, the way warm water settles into cold hands, slowly, with a slight ache where the relief met the places that had been frozen. Silas sat down on the step beside her. He did not say anything. He just sat there, which was the right thing to do. And after a while, Josie said, "I've been the oldest one for 3 weeks." "I know," he said. "Before that, I was the oldest one while Papa was sick. That was 4 months. That's a long time for someone your age." "Yeah." She looked out at the yard where Violet and Rose were doing something complicated and probably inadvisable with a length of rope and a fence post. "Can I ask you something?" "You can ask me anything," Silas said. "I might not answer it, but you can ask." "When you lost your family," she said, "how long did it take before you felt like yourself again?" He was quiet for long enough that she thought he might be choosing not to answer. Then he said, "I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not sure I did feel like myself again. I think I felt like a different version of myself, one that had been through that thing and come out the other side." He looked at her. "But the other side exists. That's the part I want you to hear." Josie thought about this. "Is that why you came down into the canyon?" she said. "Because you'd been on the other side, and you knew there was one." Silas looked at her for a moment with an expression she couldn't fully read, and then he said, "You're going to be a formidable person when you grow up, Josie Carter." "I'm formidable now," she said. "Yes," he said. "You are." The days that followed moved with the particular quality of aftermath, slower than the crisis that preceded them, fuller than the emptiness that might have followed. The neighbors came. Not because anyone organized them, but because that was what neighbors did in this part of Colorado when someone had come through something hard and landed at the door of a fellow rancher. Margaret Delacroix arrived with 2 of her preserves and the information that the schoolhouse in town had a spot for 3 children, and the teacher was good and firm and didn't tolerate nonsense. The Harlan brothers came with lumber for a fence repair they had apparently decided needed doing without being asked. Caleb Pratt came with his mother, who brought a quilt, and stayed for dinner and told Rose 3 separate stories about her own childhood, each one more embellished than the last, until Rose was laughing so hard she couldn't sit up straight. Lily's fever broke completely on the 3rd day. Josie was there when it happened. She was sitting beside her baby sister in the early morning, before the rest of the house was awake, holding Lily's hand the way she had been doing off and on for 3 days, and she felt the change before she saw it. The skin under her palm cooling from hot to warm, to something that felt simply like a baby, just a baby, healthy and small and alive. Lily opened her eyes and looked up at Josie with the clear, uncomplicated gaze of an 8-month-old who has no knowledge of how frightening the last 72 hours had been, and she made the small, cheerful sound she made when she was content, the one that had always made their mother laugh. Josie pressed her forehead down against her sister's tiny chest and stayed there for a long time, listening to the heartbeat easy and steady, doing exactly what it was supposed to do. The twist that no one had anticipated came on the 5th day, from the least likely direction. A letter arrived for Silas, hand-delivered by a rider from town, and he read it at the kitchen table while Emmeline washed dishes, and Sam sat across from him doing arithmetic, and whatever was in it changed his face in a way that was slow and visible, and that Emmeline noticed before anyone else, because Emmeline noticed things. "What is it?" she said. He set the letter down. "It's from Denver, the federal land commissioner." He looked up. "The letter I claim to have sent the bluff I ran on Crane." He paused. Turns out, Pete Delacroix's telegraph message actually reached his office. Commissioner Aldridge has been monitoring Crane's land acquisitions in this county for 18 months. He's been looking for grounds to open a fraud investigation. He looked at the letter again. "He's offering me a position. Deputy Land Commissioner for the Southern Colorado Territory. Investigating fraudulent debt instruments and forced land transfers." He set the letter down. "He says my name came up in Ellison's report." Sam looked up from his arithmetic. "Are you going to take it?" "I don't know yet." "You'd be good at it," Sam said with the directness he applied to all factual assessments. "That's not the only consideration," Silas said. "What's the other consideration?" Sam asked. Silas looked at Emmeline. Emmeline looked at the dish in her hands and then set it down and turned around, and for a moment the kitchen held that particular quality of a room in which two adults are having a conversation that the children present are both too young and exactly old enough to understand. "The position is based here," Silas said. "Southern Colorado Territory. I'd be working from this county." He paused. "I wouldn't be going anywhere." Emmeline met his eyes. "That's not a small thing," she said quietly. "No," he said. "It's not." Sam looked at his arithmetic. Then he looked at Silas. Then he looked at his mother. Then he looked back at his arithmetic and said with the elaborate casualness of a 9-year-old who has made a decision and is pretending he hasn't. "The fence on the south pasture needs fixing. I told the Harlan brothers I'd help, but I'm going to need someone who knows what they're doing to show me the right way to set a post." Silas looked at him. "I know the right way to set a post," he said. "Then you should probably stay," Sam said, and went back to his arithmetic. There were things that happened in the weeks after that Josie would carry for the rest of her life. She would carry the morning Silas put a horse under her for the first time, and she realized that she was laughing. Actually laughing, not the tight functional kind of laughing she had learned to produce, so her siblings wouldn't be frightened, but the involuntary kind that came from somewhere below decision-making and couldn't be stopped. She had not made that sound in so long that it startled her when she heard it come out of her own chest, and she looked over at Silas to see if he had noticed, and he had. And he was not smiling exactly, but there was something in his face that was adjacent to it. She would carry the evening Sam came in from the barn, smelling like horses and hay, and sat down at the dinner table and said without preamble, "I think I want to be a rancher." And the table went quiet, and then Silas said, "That's a fine thing to want to be." And Sam said, "I know." And that was the whole conversation, but it was everything. She would carry Violet's voice reading aloud to Rose from the book the school teacher had sent home, stumbling over the longer words but refusing help, reading all the way to the end with the stubborn, luminous determination of a 7-year-old who has decided that reading is hers now and no one is taking it from her. She would carry the afternoon she came through the kitchen door and found her mother and Silas standing at the window, not touching, not speaking, watching Sam and Rose and Violet in the yard, and the quality of the silence between them, not empty silence, but the kind that is so full of something that it has no room for words. She stepped back out of the kitchen quietly and let them have it. Emmeline testified before the federal court in Denver 7 weeks later. She brought the bag with the lining and the documents, and she stood in the witness box for 4 hours, and she answered every question in the same clear, organized voice she had used with Marshall Ellison at the kitchen table. She did not flinch. She did not hesitate. She named every name on the list she had written from memory in her dark kitchen 3 years prior, and every name held. Emmett Crane was convicted on 6 counts of fraud and 4 counts under the federal anti-trafficking statutes that had been passed 2 years prior and were being applied for one of the first times in the Southern Territories to exactly the kind of operation he had been running. The sentence was substantial. The network was dismantled. 38 of the 41 names on Emmeline's list were located over the following 2 years, their situations documented, their debts annulled. Josie learned all of this gradually in pieces, the way you learn the full shape of something that was too large to see all at once when you were standing inside it. On the morning they came home from Denver, all 6 of them, Silas having ridden in as well on the grounds that someone needed to drive the wagon. Josie sat on the wagon bench with Lily in her lap, and Lily grabbed her finger with both hands, the way she had been doing since she was 3 days old, and Josie looked at the Colorado sky stretching wide and high and impossibly blue over the ridge, and she felt it, the thing she had not felt in 4 months of her father's illness, and 3 weeks of running, and 1 brutal day in a canyon. She felt her own age, 12 years old, a child, still with so much ahead of her that it was almost frightening, but frightening in the good way, the way that meant there was something worth moving toward. The ranch came into view as they crested the ridge, and Rose said home from the back of the wagon with the automatic certainty of a 5-year-old who had already made her decision about what that word meant and where it applied. And nobody corrected her because nobody disagreed. Silas pulled the wagon to a stop in the yard and set the brake and looked at the house that had been silent for 4 years, now lit in every window because Sam had ridden ahead to get there first and had apparently decided that every lamp in the place needed to be on to mark the occasion. He looked at it for a long moment. Emmeline sat beside him on the bench. She did not look at the house. She looked at his profile, the set of his jaw, the particular quality of his stillness. "What are you thinking?" she said. "I'm thinking it sounds like a house with people in it," he said. "It does," she said. "I forgot what that sounded like." She put her hand over his on the reins. Not dramatically, not with performance, just the plain, deliberate gesture of a woman who knows her own mind and has decided to act on it. He looked down at her hand and then at her face, and something in him that had been held shut for 4 years opened quietly like a window in a room that has needed air for a very long time. Inside, Rose was calling for someone to come see what she had found. It was a cat. It turned out a barn cat with 3 kittens that had taken up residence in the feed room, and this discovery would fuel approximately 6 days of negotiation about names. Sam was at the stove attempting to heat something with the focused intensity of a boy who had decided that contributing to dinner was now part of his identity. Violet was reading to Lily in the corner, making up half the words, but delivering them with such conviction that Lily listened with complete attention. The house was loud and warm and full of the particular kind of beautiful chaos that is indistinguishable from family. Josie stood in the doorway between the yard and the house, and she looked at all of it, her mother and Silas coming up the porch steps behind her, her sisters and brother and baby, Lily inside the neighbors who would come tomorrow, and the days after the school where she would go on Monday, for the first time in a year. The horse Silas had said was hers to ride whenever she wanted the long open summer ahead of them, with nothing chasing it, and she felt the thing settle into her chest that had been missing for so long. She had stopped expecting to feel it again. Safety. Not the absence of danger, because she was old enough to know that danger was always somewhere on the horizon, but the deep bone-level safety of knowing that she was not alone in it, that there were people at her back, that the world contained alongside everything hard and cruel and frightening people who would ride down into a canyon for a stranger's children and neighbors who would show up with lumber and quilts and a mother who had sewn the truth into a bag lining and carried it across 3 states, and a boy named Sam who had walked a wounded man's horse to safety because he had decided 9 years old and certain as the sunrise that some things simply needed doing. The Carter family had come through the worst of it not because the world had been kind to them. It had not been. They had come through it because they had refused every single one of them to stop. And that the refusing the holding on the screaming into a canyon until someone answered, that was not something Emmett Crane or any man like him had ever been able to take from them, no matter how hard he tried. It was theirs. It had always been theirs. And standing in the doorway of a house that was home now with the Colorado summer burning gold around her and her whole family alive, and inside it, Josie Carter knew, with the quiet, unshakable certainty of a 12-year-old who has earned the right to know it, they were going to be just fine.
Fantastic bunch. Chaos Gremlins, as Brenda would probably say, but they're amazing. So, how have you been feeling? I am a bit meh, a little not. I don't know how to put it. Like, some parts have been really touching. I'll put it that way. But it's like, I think it's best. I think Pix has like quoted it best for the expansions that he's completed. Most recently, that is predictable. Some of the storylines, you know what I mean? If that makes any sense. Like, it's predictable, but at the same time, I appreciate it's been great to some degree, but also it's very obvious new start. Yes, that's true. Exactly. No, it is a very obvious new start. That is for sure. But it's weird. It's like, it feels weird. It doesn't feel like, yeah, I don't want to give anything away. So I'm going to hold my tongue for now. But I'm totally down to chat later. Hijinks. Totally down for that. Also, I think we're on the 19th. We've done 19 rows, I think. Not. Oh, also, by the way, y'all, my cat Jordy made a contribution to the knit. He was like, I need to put my claw in your piece. I need to touch it. It was adorable, nonetheless. I was like, no, I can't wait to see where they go from here. When they did a Realm Reborn restart, they didn't have all of this stuff planned out for how we would end up being in the story, and now they have established kind of a formula. Yeah, exactly. No, that's true. 100%. I think it's better to have a formula than to just like, I would rather it be this a little bit predictable than what Blizzard has done with WoW. WoW just feels like it's all over the place with the story. Not saying that there aren't parts of 14 that are like that, but I feel like it's more cohesive. Love Shadowbringers, yeah. Hello, Aranita. How's it going? Welcome in. How's your night going? Hope you're doing well. Is anyone working on any fiber art tonight? Or you're welcome to also share what video games you're playing. And then the main set or the patches? No, I'm at the main